My name is MaxZine Weinstein. I'm 44 years old. I always have to start that over because it just makes me laugh. I haven't said that age yet. Hi, my name's MaxZine Weinstein. I am 44 years old, and I live at IDA, which is a queer community in the woods of Middle Tennessee. I come from a nice Jewish family, not so big, but kind of big in the mind anyway, if you know what I mean. And oy vey, my family came mainly from Russia or some undetermined border area. Was it Ukraine? Was it Russia? Was it Prussia? And they came here in the late 1800s, and then more of them in the early 1900s. Pause. So, my family, they come from the old country. They were escaping Tsarist Russia. It was really bad. The people who immigrated to the States, they didn't talk much to their kids about some of the horrors they witnessed. My brother and one of my brothers and I particularly wanted to know a lot about where our family story, and we were wondering why we didn't get it much growing up. One time I asked my great aunt Ida to tell me stories about life back in Russia, and she says to me, "Oh, I tell you, it was a very nice family. There was a teacher, there was this, there was that," and I'm like, okay, a nice family, but can you tell me a little more what life was like? Oh, well, we were very lovely people in the shtetl, and I'm like, okay, Aunt Ida, can you... And the more I asked her, the more I didn't actually get any answer, and I was young, and I realized she just couldn't talk about it. I think she was Orthodox Jew. Whatever she'd been through or seen or what had happened to her family that didn't make it out of Russia, she couldn't talk about it. She could only talk in sweeping generalizations. Well, her name was Aunt Ida, and Aunt Ida died the winter, I believe she died the winter that I moved to Ida. I don't remember when she died, but it was the first time I ever got an inheritance check. It was very small, a couple $100 or something, but I got that inheritance check the month I moved to Ida. And I was like, wow, Aunt Ida's died, and I moved to Ida. Doesn't maybe mean so much. I later found out it was hard to get information from my family about our roots. I later found out stories, little bits and pieces here and there, about, I don't even know who, but about someone hiding under a table while someone else in the family was raped, and then men being taken, Jews who were taken and forced into the Tsar's army, never to be seen from again. The families split apart. The villages might or might not exist anymore. And so I guess my family history is important to me because I also initially grew up in a suburb of New York where there were a lot of Jews, and my neighbor across the street, who was also my first dentist, was a Holocaust survivor. And growing up as a kid, first in the 60s and then in the 70s, we heard a lot about the Holocaust. There were footage being released that we saw in Hebrew school, and we were always told, never again show something like this happen. And it was somehow emblazoned in my brain that I had a responsibility to try and do my little part. So I went to public school, but I went to 5 years of Hebrew school, 3 days a week, 2 hours each time in addition to public school. And a big part of what we were taught at Hebrew school was about the Holocaust and lessons from the Holocaust. And we were taught to be a part of making a world where those kind of things could never happen again. And granted, as I grew older, I realized, well, those things were happening in different ways, and there's a lot of hypocrisy about who gets cared for and what kind of genocide gets challenged. But it was the important thing for me as a kid was from ages 8 to 13, they showed me Holocaust footage that was very awful, and I was the kind of kid that took it to heart and thought, wow, what can I do to make that never happen again? I know a lot of my family got out of Tsarist Russia, and I'm grateful. I also know a lot of my family, when they got to the States as poor, like penniless immigrant Jewish workers, were treated like shit. And I heard a story about my dad's father almost starving to death in the streets of New York, I think it was. And like, these were little stories, bits and pieces that I heard through asking family members. And I, you know, not everyone who hears stories like that is gonna then take that to start making stands for justice or moving their family stories into some kind of version of themselves that makes them passionate about change. But for whatever reason, I feel like that affected me and made me that way. So, see, they agree. There's a crowd here cheering because they agree. So, life in the New York suburbs where I lived until pretty much the start of high school, I grew up in the suburbs of New York, often really almost knowing I was bored and alienated, and life sort of seemed easy. Like, I had, my dad was born during the right when the stock market crashed, and my dad was born into a family, I think he had 4 or 5 sisters, and he said they were always told, show up at dinner or on time or no food for you, because that's all we have. And like a very disciplined Depression-era family of hard workers. And my dad was very determined that his kids wouldn't have life as hard as he did as a child. And he really started subscribing into the American dream and wanted like the good life for the family in the suburbs. And I'm really grateful for his and my mom's efforts to give us a really comfortable life, much more comfortable than anything they had known as kids. I think that's a remarkable thing to do. And it also felt like at times a really hollow life. We were on the edge of like the suburbs and the country on Long Island. There were beautiful farms near us. And of course we lived in a place that had been farmland. I didn't associate our moving out there as kind of helping to wreck farmland, but I saw the pumpkin patches that we used to sneak in as kids being destroyed one after the next, seeing the potato fields disappear, all this amazing fertile farmland on Long Island turning into condominiums and gated communities and strip mall after strip mall. And I watched this massive destruction of farmland and woods, and I hated it. I liked to go play in the woods and the farms, and it was disappearing as I was growing older. There was a pond I used to love to go ice skating on, and we played ice hockey on the pond every winter. And then one winter we went back there, and we went to the woods where this pond was, and we kept seeing more and more garbage there, and it was getting kind of grosser. One winter, the water in the pond was gone, and we saw that people had dumped washing machines or ovens or appliances that didn't work anymore. And I was still like 12, 13 maybe, and I just couldn't understand why would people wreck this beauty to throw garbage there, which I guess they throw garbage in the pond or the woods because they don't have to pay a fee at the landfill or drive to the landfill. And I don't know, I think watching suburban development encroach on rural areas was one of the pivotal things for me that would come back to me later in life, because it was really upsetting.